5, 4, 3, 2, 1, drop that.
Welcome to the Test Guild Automation Podcast. We're all getting together to learn more about software testing and automation with your host, Joe Colantonio.
Hey, it's Joe, and welcome to another episode of the Test Guild Automation Podcast. Today we'll be talking with Mudit Singh all about cross-browser automation, Selenium, and more. Mudit is the Director of Product and Growth at LambdaTest and has years of expertise around product development, testing, automation, Selenium, and Selenium Grid. So listen up. The Test Guild Automation Podcast is sponsored by the fantastic folks at Sauce Labs. Their cloud-based test platform helps ensure your favorite mobile apps and websites work flawlessly on every browser, operating system, and device. Get a free trial. Visit testguild.com/Sauce Labs and click on the exclusive sponsor section to try it for free for 14 days. Check it out. Hey, Mudit. Welcome to the Guild.
Hi, Joe. Thanks for having me here. Thanks for taking the time to connect with the call.
Awesome. So before we get into it, could you just tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Right. So my name is Mudit Singh. I've been, since I graduated around 10 years ago, I have been in the space of software development, specifically web software development. So I started off as a coder myself. And after 2 to 3 years, I went into the product space. I started helping the teams in the management of the product and defining the product development guidelines. And I have been basically, for past 3 years now, I'm working with a company called LambdaTest. And here we are building up a cross-browser compatibility testing platform, focusing on helping users perform both manual and automation tests. So we are building up an infrastructure that can help users to eliminate the need for building up an in-house device lab.
Very cool. So I guess the first question I have is around cross-browser testing. Is it still relevant? What I mean by that is I always hear that the JavaScript engines are becoming more and more similar. So as a company, you probably see a lot of clients, a lot of scenarios. Are there really differences still between the browsers that people need to be testing for?
Yes, that's one of the most important questions that comes to us. And the simple answer is yes, there is still a relevance of testing on browsers. To understand it more, we need to have a look into the history of the browser development itself. So there's a term that people use nowadays, and it's been still going on. It's called browser wars. So since the first browser was launched nearly around 20 to 30 years ago, called Netscape. So from that time itself, the first competitor started off from Microsoft themselves as Internet Explorer, and that triggered the first, browser wars. Since then, there are multiple players in the market. Each have their own different technology that they are using in the backend. Each have their own different motivation of developing the same piece of technology called browsers that help you access the internet. So right now, if you look at the different browsers that there are, for example, Chrome, Firefox, Safari, Opera, Internet Explorer, Edge, each of them uses a very totally different technology in the backend. So for example, Chrome uses a browser engine called Blink and a JavaScript engine called V8. On the other hand, Firefox uses a different engine called Quantum. It's the latest one. Earlier, it used to use Gecko and a JavaScript engine called SpiderMonkey. And because each browser has a different engine working in the back end, the end results of a same piece of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript code comes out totally differently in each different browsers.
Absolutely. So how does one test for that then? Is it more just visual validation, or can you give us an example of a solution to get around that particular issue with being able to validate against all these different browsers? And I'm sure it also, the desktop versions and the devices also kind of can cause issues as well on top of it.
Right. So It's what we call cross-browser testing. It's the core of it. So the only solution to this problem is that you would have to test your same website, your same piece of code across all the different browsers and all the different operating systems, in fact, and all the different mobile devices as well. So there is no workaround for this. You have to test on all the browsers, operating systems. It's all depends upon how important different browsers are for you, and based on that you can define a strategy for your cross browser testing. So for example, each browser has a different demographics that they are using, so you can differentiate based on the target audience that you are going to target. Your website or web app that you are going to build, it would have differences on the audience on the basis of the device they are using. So for example, if it's a banking application, banking software which is used by mainly, you can say, bank employees, it would be targeted for desktop web browsers. However, if you are building a, for example, a news website or a social media channel, you know most of the users would be using it on mobile. So you can prioritize your testing based on your audience. So there are a number of tricks how you can do it. First is obviously the audience. Then you can also see. So this is all predictive analysis. So you can predict how the audience will, which type of audience will come, and based on that create a strategy. Then other would be a reactive strategy. So for example, you would have a Google Analytics code in your website or your web app. So in Google Analytics tells you like these are the browsers and these are the operating systems, even browser versions, devices your users are using to access your website. You can find it in Google Analytics, and there's a specific technology section in the user section there. And based on that, you can define a strategy like these are the most important browsers for me, and then I have to perform a test on these browsers. So once you have a list of browsers that are most important for you, we can build, you can say, a kind of browser metric. Like these are the browser versions, these are the devices of those browser versions, these are the operating system. You kind of build a matrix of all the operating systems that you will need to run your test on. So once you have a list of the browsers, the next step is to find out what would be the best strategy to test on all these browsers. So uh, earlier, what people used to do is they used to create a device lab in-house. So if you are a big enterprise, you have deep pockets. You can purchase multiple different browser, multiple different devices, and multiple different, you can say, desktop applications as well, and desktop devices as well. So for example, if you want to test on Safari, you would need a Mac laptop, and if you want to test on Edge, you would need a Windows laptop. So you have to invest on different hardware as well. So this is an expensive method, agreed. But if you have a very limited number of browsers that you want to test on, this is the fastest and the, you can say, ideal solution for you. However, if, for example, you have to test on a huge list of browsers, a huge list of different browsers and browser versions, the best solution right now would be to go for a cloud-based solution.
I definitely agree. I think a cloud-based solution saves so much time. You don't want to spend your time as a tester worrying about a lab when you have solutions out there like yourself and Sauce Labs that provide these for you. But I guess a lot of pushback I get is, well, I'll just set up a Selenium grid, or I'll just have Docker instances come up and fire up, or I use something like Selenium, which is a cool solution. So what would be some pros and cons to someone going to more of a Selenium grid type approach?
Right. So again, Selenium Grid is a very great way to set up an automation system and test on different browsers. So let's start with the cloud-based approach as well, right? So there are multiple ways that you can create a, you can say, cloud-based infrastructure for yourself. You can go to a service provider like LambdaTest and Sauce Labs. So they have built-in machines that are ready to fire up, ready to scale up. You can run your test on there directly. So, but that's our, like, you can say, easier approach. Another approach would be to create and set up this kind of infrastructure for yourself. So you go to a cloud-based infrastructure provider, for example, like AWS or Rackspace or DigitalOcean, and you can even go to a bare metal host server providers, and then use containers, Dockers, and Selenium itself to create a grid of your own. The challenges here would be that you would be limited to the number of browsers that you can really test on. There are the limitations on that as well. So, for example, Mac machines, if you want to test on Safari, you need a online Mac solution provider, and they are totally different than the people who are providing Windows or Linux machines. So Mac only works with authorized Mac resellers, and they are also very costly to, you can say, lease on different resellers. For example, there's Mac Stadium. You can contact them to lease Mac machines online. The another challenge is to maintain the browser versions. So Chrome has a very fast release cycle. Every 2 to 3 months they come out with a new version. Firefox has a similar fast release cycle. Every 2 to 3 months they come out with a new version. So every time a new version is called, you will have to change your Docker image to like update this change in the browser. So you would have to maintain your browser infrastructure every time. And the same problem comes with whenever a new operating system is launched. So, for example, Mac is going to launch. Mac just launched their new operating system, Catalina. So every time a new operating system is launched, you have to update your all their infrastructure to match this new update. And of course, the another challenge comes is in the execution of the test itself. So a cloud-based service usually have a little bit of more latency because there's a, you can say, a cloud network involved. So every command thread takes a little bit longer to go from your local machine to the cloud infrastructure and then execute back. So test thread wise, execution takes a little bit longer. However, the advantage here is that you can create multiple different machines at the same time. You can test on multiple different machines at the same time. So that is called parallel testing, and that will drastically reduce down your test execution time. So, for example, if you have 100 tests, each test take 1 minute to execute. So for now, it would take, for example, 100 minutes to execute your whole suite in a sequential. However, if you have 10 different machines and same, you run all these tests on parallelly on these machines, your whole suite will complete within 10 minutes, right? So you cut down your test execution by a factor of 10 by increasing the number of machines you want to test on. But this again increases a new added, you can say, work for the DevOps teams, that they have to maintain a test infrastructure of 10 different type of machines. They have to scale up those machines, scale down. They have to optimize the performance. They have to clean these machines every time the test is completed. So there's an added overhead related to the DevOps team, but it is offset by the fact that now you have a better browser coverage and better test execution times.
All great points. I know the company I used to work for, they were in healthcare, and they had to maintain their browser versions for IE because they had customers that still were on IE 10. So if that's the case, do you find that often with companies, bigger businesses, having to deal with certain browser versions that are older or not even maintained by the browser vendor anymore? And if so, are those still versions that you support yourself as a company?
Right, exactly. So that is one of the main reasons as well. So, for example, Internet Explorer 11, it is still like, people ask me like, these are very archaic browsers, very old browsers. Nobody is using them. But if you check the available stats online, around 1% people are still using Internet Explorer. So 1% is not a very big term. If your traffic is, for example, like 100 people are coming to your website, or like 100,000 people are coming to your website. However, if a million people are coming to your website, that 1% amount to like 100,000, and that may amount to, you can say, $100,000 of a revenue. So that Internet Explorer suddenly becomes very important for them. So testing on an Internet Explorer browser, which is not even provided in the latest Windows infrastructure, it becomes a challenge. You will not find Windows Internet Explorer 10 anywhere in any latest Windows machine. So you have to go back and you have to search the internet to find out the older browser versions. And Internet Explorer is a little bit easier because they had very few versions till 11. But what about Firefox? So when Firefox started, from Firefox 4 till now, it is Firefox 76, Firefox 70's version that is still being used right now. So there is 60 to 70 different versions that you have to collect and kind of maintain to make sure that you are covering all the type of users that may come to your website.
Absolutely. So I guess that's one extreme example is IE, but I guess another extreme I've been seeing is more and more automation tools that are coming out just support Chrome and not even support the other browsers. So have you been seeing this in the market? And if so, any pros and cons for, Chrome really dominating this market as of now?
Right. So most of the so Chrome has a, you can say, market share of 70%. So quite a lot of tools bank upon this fact that Chrome is the most important browser for you. And in some ways, this is one of the main reasons why a little Selenium is still not, you can say, have 100% coverage. Like it does not dominate a full 100%. It is most dominant used automation framework, but there are others as well that are kind of giving Selenium a challenge. So, for example, JavaScript-based testing tools like Cypress, Zest, Mocha, these are all kind of work with directly with Chrome. So they, however, do not have Cypress, for example, does not have browser compatibility testing capabilities. And this is one of the main reasons why Selenium is still one of the most preferred automation testing framework in enterprises. And so there are pros for Cypress as well. I will not say that Cypress is a bad platform. Cypress has its own users. It is built from the ground up to help front-end developers in their testing, right? It is very, very fast when we compare to Selenium. It uses JavaScript, which is the language that front-end developers understand. They won't have to go to another different language. And it works, you can say, it has a very fast feedback and turnaround time. Debugging using Cypress is a little bit easier as compared to Selenium. But if cross-browser compatibility or browser compatibility testing is important for you, you would have to move to a platform like Selenium, which covers a broad scope of number of browsers. Like nearly all browsers are compatible with Selenium.
So again, it's almost like a catch-22, though. I understand the reason why Cypress works with Chrome, and I think it's a good solution for certain folks. But the other issue is if you're using Selenium and you're running it against Chrome, and then you run it against Firefox, the results might be different. So you have to do strange hacks to it. So have you seen, I understand that it'd be great to spin up all your tests against all the browsers and test all the things, but at the same time, I've seen certain functionality like hover over work differently in Chrome than it does in Firefox. So if someone's using Selenium, are there any workarounds for that or any best practices you've seen around that area?
So usually there's obviously a few, you can say, hacks involved in making sure that your website works in all different browsers. And similarly, that goes with the testing itself. There are a few functionalities in Selenium which works perfectly with Chrome. However, when you run the same code on a Firefox, you would have to tweak the code there. This is something that you can say the community is working upon bit by bit, and this problem will solve in itself when the differences between browsers will kind of close around. However, there's still, you can say, you would have to tweak your code every time you want to run your test on. So there are other libraries that can help you in you can say bridge this gap. For example, there's a library called Modernize. You can use them. Then there's a library called Babel.js. You can use them to kind of define how your website works on different browsers. But again, it's onus of the tester to make sure how their code is working with different browsers.
So, as a company, like I said, I love speaking to companies because you have a lot of customers and you probably have statistics. So, for best practices, do you recommend people run their entire test suite against all the browsers, or do you usually recommend, okay, you run a majority of your tests maybe against Chrome, and then have maybe 10 high-level end-to-end tests that you run against all the other browsers? Is that something that you even get into?
Right. So as an automation testing platform, we are usually integrated in the complete CI/CD development pipeline of the tool itself, right? So right now there's a term that people use called continuous testing. So every time, every day, in fact, whenever all the people commit their code, an automated test using Jenkins and other CI/CD tools automatically fires and it executes a complete test suite of that present code, right? So people usually prioritize basis of that as well. So Chrome and Firefox, Safari, these three are the most important browsers. You have to run a test on them because they have the largest browser share. Uh, every time you put a commit, you can run out a new, you can say, infrastructure grade to run your test on. However, you can delay the testing on other browsers, like for example Edge and Internet Explorer. You can again, as I said, these are all based on the priorities. So when we built up our browser matrix earlier, we defined like which browsers are most important for you and which devices are most important for us, and based on that we kind of prioritize our testing cycle as well. So again, most of these whenever we build a matrix, Chrome, Safari, Firefox are the most important ones. However, Internet Explorer and Edge are still used by a lot of people, and there is a testing involved over that browser as well, but the comparative time is a little bit less.
Besides cross-browser functionality, which is a given, a benefit for using an online provider, are there any other benefits you see that people don't think about or know about, or any features by using an online cloud provider you get that you may not even think about?
So, of course, there's you can say a significant cost involved as well when you set up your own grid. So, for example, if you want to set up your own grid, so for example, let's take a simple example of let's take a simple example of AWS, right? So AWS, if I want to run successful tests using AWS, and I wanted them to run in a, like you can say, decent pace, I would have to go with a machine that has around 8 to 16 GB of RAM, and kind of have a, you can say, SSD hard drive. So these are usually what we call C5D 2x large machines that cost around 0.75 cents per hour, right? So, but if we calculate on this basis, like I want to run this machine, I want to run 100 of these machines, and I want to run all this test for around, let's say, 12 hours a day, and I want to run them every for 30 to 40 days during my 6 months of development process. The costing of this machine that is being maintained with AWS goes to like 6 to 7 figures, right? Six figures, in fact. So based on that, cloud-based provider has who has optimized their infrastructure comes out a little bit cheaper. They are, you can say, because it's a kind of a shared infrastructure. The tests that you are running, after that, those tests has been performed, those machines are cleaned, and then they are being given to other users. So there's a, you can say, a community of users who are using that infrastructure. So on a shared basis, the you can say test the margins of maintaining that infrastructure goes down. So in a longer term, these test service providers are cheaper. Another aspect is, so as I said, like if you want to run your test on 100 different machines, you would have to maintain those 100 different machines. So that requires a significant effort in both development and maintenance. So running 100 different machines will require you to build up a you require you to use different type of tools like VMware, container, Docker. You would have to create templates for all these 100 machines. You would have to maintain those templates. You would have to like upgrade those templates, and then you would have to create scripts that will automatically scale up those machines. And once the testing is done, they would automatically clean those machines so that during the next testing cycle, those machines do not interfere with the already with the new running tests. So you would have to clear all the cookies, all the release, all the history. So you would have to create scripts to for the maintenance of those 100 VMs as well. So this is the stuff that is done by our platform. We are eliminating the need for infrastructure development, infrastructure maintenance, and infrastructure scaling up in house. We are eliminating the need for having a dedicated DevOps team just for your testing. So that way, you can focus more on building code for and shipping products faster. You can ship products with better quality and ultimately write more tests.
You're the first person I've spoken to since Selenium 4 has been released. And I'm just curious to know how a provider even handles that. Are any new features in Selenium 4 that you think are really going to impact maybe cross-browser testing or testing in general?
Right. So if you are using Selenium right now, running the new release of Selenium 4 won't impact you that much because the new Selenium 4 will be backward compatible with all the Selenium code that you have already written. However, if you want to start off by building your new infrastructure, like new Selenium codes, new Selenium suites from now, you would have to take into the account the new protocols, the new grammar that is there involved in writing the code. So earlier, the Selenium was using. So Selenium is basically made up of four different aspects. One is there the Selenium client libraries. Then there are browser drivers, and then there's browser itself. However, the fourth one is what we usually used to call JSON wire protocol. So that is the, you can say, collection of APIs that sends the instructions to browser drivers, and those browser drivers run the browsers and the like all the instructions on the browsers. So this protocol, this API, the instructions of APIs, the instruction sets of APIs has changed a little bit. So uh, since the like last 4 to 5 years, people have been working on standardizing these API sets, and we are now using W3C protocols. So the set of instructions to send back to the browser drivers a little bit different. Uh, there are new added capabilities as well. So, for example, there's a new thing called Action APIs. So earlier it was a challenge to run multiple actions at the same time. That was used in, for example, mobile devices. So mobile devices has two touch gestures like to zoom in, zoom out. So these kind of gestures were not earlier possible. However, the new action APIs will help you perform multiple different test actions at the same time. And this is what is changing in the new Selenium 4. Another change would be the deprecations. So earlier, so all the deprecated APIs that were there on Selenium, they used to give a warning. Now they will start giving you an error. So you would have to make sure that your Selenium code is updated to at least to 3.4 or 3.x or 4.0 standards. If you're using very old versions, you may have to change a few of the APIs. And but apart from that, everything works perfectly. It is very backward, like Selenium 4 would be completely compatible with all Selenium 3.x versions, and you can use them as it is.
Before we go, is there one piece of actual advice you can give someone to help them with their automation or cross-browser testing efforts? And let us know the best way to find, contact you, or learn more about LambdaTest.
Right. So the best information that I can, the best piece of advice that I give to every even enterprise clients as well is to build up their browser coverage bit by bit. Start off with Chrome, start off with Firefox, Safari, and then see how users are coming to your platform, and based on that, increase your browser coverage bit by bit. So there is a movement, you can say, a way to automate each and every aspect of the testing, but you cannot overlook the fact that human testers are still the best eyes there is. So you cannot overlook the manual or exploratory testing part as well. So you would have to make sure that you as a developer are giving at least 3 to 4 hours a week on making sure that your application is working as intended, right? And if you want to know more about Lambda Test, you can check out our website, lambdatest.com. We have an in-app, in-website chat support as well. We are very active there. Anytime you face any issue in using Lambda Test, or want to know more about cross-browser testing, want to know more about automation testing or Selenium, just ping us there, and there will be somebody out there to help you out. Even I am there, very active on our in-app chat support.
Thank you, Mudit, for your cross-browser automation awesomeness. For links to everything of value we covered in this episode, head on over to testguild.com/A like automation 275. And while you're there, make sure to click on the Try It for Free Today link under the exclusive sponsor section to learn all about Sauce Labs' awesome products and services. So that's it for this episode of the Test Guild Automation Podcast. I'm Joe, and my mission is to help you succeed with creating full-stack automation awesomeness. As always, test everything and keep the good. Cheers.
Thanks for listening to the Test Guild Automation Podcast. Head on over to testguild.com for full show notes, amazing blog articles, and online testing conferences. Make sure to subscribe to join the guild and continue your testing journey. This has been a Joe Calantonio production.